Ask any marine surveyor which boats they would actually put their own money on, and the same short list of names comes up every time. Not the shiny ones under the showroom lights. The ones built so heavy and so stubborn that a hull from the 1970s is barely middle-aged. One brand got sawed in half on camera and still drove away across the water. Another has crossed oceans for tens of thousands of miles on its very first hull. 5 boats. Buy one of them right, and you may never buy a boat again. I read boats for a living, not the way a salesman reads them, talking about cup holders and sound systems. I read them the way a coroner reads a body, looking for what went wrong, where the water got in, which corner the builder cut to make the price look good on a Saturday morning. And most boats tell the same sad story. A new one starts losing value the moment it leaves the lot. 10 to 20% of it is gone in the first year alone, and close to 40% inside 5 years. That is not an opinion. That is the curve every lender already knows. So when a boat lands on my table that refuses to quit, that holds its value while everything around it bleeds, I pay attention. There are only a handful of them. The kind of hull a careful buyer waits years to find, then never sells. By the end of this, you will know all 5, and you will know the one that I think outlives almost everyone who ever signs for it. It is not the most expensive, it is not the newest, it is older than most of the people watching this. And in a market where dealers are dumping inventory and owners are walking away from their loans, it might be the smartest $40,000 a person can spend on the water. We start with the one that built its whole name on a single, almost unbelievable promise. The first name on that list is Boston Whaler, and it earned its place with a stunt. Years ago, the company took one of its own boats, a brand new one, and cut it clean in half with a saw. Then they took the back half, the piece with the engine on it, and drove it around the harbor like nothing had happened. It did not sink. It could not sink. They have shot their hulls with a machine gun and driven heavy equipment over them just to prove the same point. Here is why that works. Between the outer skin and the inner deck of a whaler, there is no empty space. The whole shell is filled with foam, poured in and bonded so the boat becomes one solid piece. The company calls it the Unibond process, a single welded body instead of a hull and a deck, simply bolted together. Chop a whaler into 1,000 chunks and every single chunk still floats. That is not marketing. That is physics. So what does that have to do with your money? Everything. A boat that cannot rot in the middle and cannot fill with water is a boat that is still worth something 30 and 40 years later. Pull up the used listings and you will see whalers from the 1970s and 80s still selling, still running, still wanted. The brand loses only about 10% of its value in the first year, while a cheaper boat sheds 15 or 20 in the same 12 months. The classic models barely sit on the market before someone buys them. And the proof the design was right the first time is simple. The Montauk, one of Whaler's earliest real boats, is still in production today, decades later, because the basic idea was right from the very start. Walk a boatyard with me, and I will show you the difference in 10 seconds. On a cheap boat, I tap the deck and listen for a soft, dull thud, the sound of water that has crept into the core and turned the floor to wet cardboard. On an old whaler, I tap and I hear a hard knock, like rapping on a countertop, because there is nothing in there to soak up water in the first place. The hardware is built the same way. The rails and the cleats are heavy-grade stainless steel, the kind that does not weep, rust down the side of the hull after a couple of salt seasons. None of this makes a whaler cheap to buy. It makes it cheap to own, which is a very different thing, and it is the thing nobody at the dealership wants to explain to you. Because if you understood it, you would stop asking what the monthly payment is and start asking what the boat is worth in 15 years. And that question leads straight to the second name on the surveyor's list, a builder that took a different road to the same place. Grady White does not cut its boats in half for the cameras. It wins a quieter way. And the proof is in who builds them. The people running Grady White have been there for decades. The president started at the company decades ago and never left, and the executive team has 30+ years each under the same roof. That matters more than it sounds. When the same hands lay up the same hull for 30 years, the mistakes get found and fixed, and the quality stops being luck. Every Grady hull is laid up by hand, sheet by sheet, not chopped and sprayed by a machine in a hurry. The fittings that pass through the bottom of the boat, the ones that let water in if they ever fail, are made of a marine-grade stainless steel that fights corrosion instead of feeding it. The hull shape itself, what the company calls its continuously variable V, is designed to carry a heavy sea without hammering the people on board. So here is the number that should stop you. A 3-year-old Grady White still holds about 75% of what it sold for new. Read that again. Most boats have given back close to a third of their value by year 3. A Grady has given back only a quarter. On a boat that cost $80,000, that gap is real money. The difference between selling for $60 and selling for 45, and that is exactly why both Grady White and Boston Whaler sit at the top of the resale charts year after year, well above the industry average. They cost more on the way in, and they hand far more of it back on the way out. Now, I want to be straight with you, because this is where a lot of videos start lying. A Grady White will not make you money. Almost no boat does. What it does is lose you the least, and in a falling market, losing the least is how you win. While the man next to you watches his bargain brand shed 40% and then struggle to sell at any price, you are holding a boat that buyers actually chase. Getting rich on a boat is a fantasy. Not getting wiped out by one is a plan. There is one more reason holding value matters, and it shows up the day something goes wrong. When you insure a boat that holds its worth, you can buy what is called an agreed value policy, where the insurer locks in a set payout up front before anything happens. The cheap alternative only pays you the depreciated value at the moment of the loss, whatever the boat has bled down to after years on the water. On a $200,000 boat, that gap can be more than $40,000 after 5 years, so a boat that holds its value does not just sell better. It protects you better the day it sinks, burns, or blows off its trailer on the highway. If a boat that holds its value while the whole market drops sounds like the kind of thing you want to know before you sign anything, subscribe. I break down one of these every week. The boats worth buying, and the ones quietly bleeding their owners dry. Now, back to the surveyor's list, because the third boat makes everything you just heard look small. The third boat is a Fleming, and to understand it, you have to understand the man who built it. When Fleming designed his bigger cruising yacht, he kept the very first one off the line for himself. He named her Venture. Then he did something almost no boat builder ever does. He took her to sea and kept her there. He ran that single hull from Mexico up to Alaska, down again, through the Panama Canal, up the east coast of America and into Canada, year after year, racking up more than 60,000 miles of open water on one boat. 60,000 miles. That is more than twice around the planet on the first hull he ever made, and she is still going. Why does that matter to a buyer in a falling market? Because it is proof you cannot fake. Most builders test a boat for an afternoon and put it in a brochure. Fleming bet his own name on a single hull for 20 years of hard ocean miles. The boat is built to match. The hull is solid fiberglass, one thick laminate all the way through, with no foam or soft core hidden in the middle to soak up water and rot out from the inside. The keel, the spine that runs along the bottom, runs the full length of the boat and sits lower than the propellers. So if you ever run aground, the keel takes the hit instead of your running gear. It is rated to the highest offshore class a boat can carry, the certification that says this vessel can cross an ocean, not just hug the coast. More than 300 of them are out there cruising the world right now, and the company will tell you not one has ever had its hull broken open by a grounding or a collision. So here is what happens to a boat like that on the used market. It does not crash in value because the people who want one know exactly how rare it is, and they are in no hurry to sell. A well-kept Fleming from decades ago still commands serious money because the buyer is not paying for a model year. He is paying for a hull that has already proven it will outlast him. Now, I will be honest about the catch because you deserve it. This is not a $40,000 boat. A Fleming is a serious amount of money, the kind of purchase you make once in a life if you make it at all. But that is the whole point of this list. You are not buying cheap, you are buying last. And there is a reason I put this boat in the middle instead of at the end, because as impressive as a Fleming is, it is not the boat I would point a normal buyer toward in this market. The one I would point you toward is cheaper, older, and in some ways tougher to sink. We will get there, but first there is a builder most people have never heard of, started by a man who walked away from the most famous boat company in America because he thought he could build something even stronger. That builder is Edgewater, and the man behind it used to run engineering at Boston Whaler. He left the most respected name in the business because he believed he could build a hull that was tougher still, so he did. Instead of laying up a boat in open molds, piece by piece, Edgewater builds the hull and the deck in one single shot, pulling the resin through the glass under pressure so the whole structure cures as one solid bonded piece. The company claims the result is 3 times stronger than a boat built the old way. Now, builders make big claims all the time, and a good surveyor takes them with a grain of salt, but here is the part the market confirms. There are not many Edgewaters out there, because they were never a huge volume brand, and the few that come up for sale fetch solid resale prices, precisely because the buyers who know what they are cannot find them easily. Scarcity plus strength is a powerful thing on a resale listing. The boat is built around the same idea that runs through this entire list. Keep water out of the structure. A hull that is one solid bonded piece, with no seam for water to sneak into and no hidden core to soak it up, is a hull that ages slowly. And slow aging is the entire secret to a boat that outlives you. Think about what actually destroys a boat. It is almost never one dramatic event. It is water, getting into a place it was never supposed to be, over years, quietly, until the floor flexes and the transom goes soft and the survey comes back with a number that makes the owner cry. Every boat on this list was built by someone who treated water as the enemy and engineered it out. The cheap boats treat water as an afterthought, and the water always wins. That is why a brand most people have never heard of can quietly outlast brands they see in every advertisement. The badge on the side does not stop the rot. The way the hull was built does. And that brings us, finally, to the boat I have been holding back this whole time. The one that breaks every rule you have been taught about buying in a down market. Because everything you have heard lately, every headline about the worst year to buy a boat, every story about owners walking away, is about new boats and recent boats. The boat that outlives you is not new. It is old enough to be your father, and that is exactly why it works. The fifth boat is a classic Grand Banks trawler, and it is the closest thing to forever this market sells. A trawler is a slow, heavy, fuel-sipping cruising boat built to go a long way in comfort instead of going fast. Grand Banks has been building them since the early 1960s. The early ones were built of wood by hand. Then, in the early 1970s, they switched to fiberglass, and those fiberglass hulls are the ones that changed everything. More than 4,000 of these classic boats were built, and here is the part that sounds impossible. Boats from the 1970s are still out there cruising right now, and the brokers who sell them will tell you, with a straight face, that a Grand Banks that is decades old is only just reaching middle age. Let that land for a second. A boat older than most people watching this is considered barely broken in. The 36-footer that started it all was built for decades, and brokers have long ranked it among the most popular trawlers ever made. That is not nostalgia. That is a design nobody needed to fix. There are more than 400 of these classic models listed for sale around the world on any given day, which means you can actually find one, and the prices will stop you. The very cheapest classic Grand Banks on the market today can be found for around $40,000. $40,000 for a boat that has already proven, over decades, that it will not quit. Compare that to a new boat the same size, which would cost you several times as much and start losing value the day you take delivery. So why does this old boat hold up when the headlines scream that 2026 is the worst year to buy? Because those headlines are about the new market. The dealers dumping inventory, the owners underwater on their loans, the bankruptcies and the liquidations, all of that is happening to new and nearly new boats, the ones that depreciate hardest. The classic Grand Banks already took its depreciation hit decades ago. The curve that crushes new boat owners has gone flat. A well-kept one barely moves in value year to year now, because it has already become what it is going to be, a proven, finished, almost timeless boat. There is a catch, and I will not hide it from you, because the whole point of this channel is to tell you what the salesman will not. These old boats wear a lot of teak, the beautiful golden wood trim that runs along the rails and the decks, and teak needs care. Skip it for a few years and the wood goes gray and the bills add up. But here's the thing the worriers miss. The teak is only the surface. The hull underneath, the part that actually keeps you alive and afloat, is the part that lasts. And surveyors who go over these boats rarely find the structure soft. The expensive part holds up. The part that needs a weekend with a brush is the part you can see. So picture the two buyers in this market. One signs for a brand new boat, drives off the lot, and watches 40% of his money evaporate over 5 years while the dealer who sold it to him quietly files for bankruptcy. The other one waits, finds a 50-year-old Grand Banks from a careful owner, pays for it once, and hands it down to his kid, still floating. One of them got sold a boat, the other one bought a legacy. The tide does not care which one you are, but you should. Step back and look at all 5 together, because the pattern is the whole lesson. Boston Whaler, Grady White, Fleming, Edgewater, and the classic Grand Banks have almost nothing in common on the surface. One is a little fishing boat, one crosses oceans, one is an old wooden-looking trawler, but under the skin they are the same boat. Every one of them was built by someone who treated water as the enemy and refused to let it into the structure. Hulls built so the water cannot reach the structure. No soft, water-soaking core, heavy hardware that does not rust away. Built by companies that stayed in business long enough to fix their own mistakes. That is the filter. Not the badge, not the brochure, not the boat show discount. When you walk a dock now, you are not looking for the prettiest boat or the cheapest payment. You are looking for the one that was built to keep water out, because that is the only boat that is still worth anything when the tide goes out on this market. And the tide is going out. Dealers are sitting on inventory, they cannot move, owners are walking away from their loans. That is not a reason to panic. For a patient buyer, it is the best news in years, because the desperation is on the other side of the table now, not yours. The graveyard of abandoned boats is full of bargains that were never built to last. The 5 on this list were: so before you sign anything, before you let a salesman rush you with an end-of-season deal, ask one question: was this boat built to keep the water out or built to keep the price down? The answer is worth more than any discount. If this is the kind of breakdown you want before you spend $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 on the water, subscribe, and I will keep showing you which boats are worth your money and which ones are quietly sinking their owners. The one on screen now is the next one you should watch, because the boat that outlives you is out there right now, waiting for the buyer patient enough to find it. The only question left is whether that buyer is you.